going back to them fight announcements, the champ Sterling, Aljamain Sterling, says he might not be ready to fight in August. He cites some nagging injuries and the quick turnaround. OMalley says he's fighting someone for the title in August, kind of dismissing Sterling's presence on the card, if you think about it. Then Dana White guaranteed the fight will be happening when he fielded questions at the Fight Night 224 post-fight. Since then, Sterling tweets, quote, I guess, is that how you do it with Twitter? I don't know. He says, F it. Let's run it July 8th and see if you're really built like that. And he tags Sugar Sean, ESPN MMA, UFC. Sean O'Malley tweets back, I ain't built like that. See you on August 19th. And then mocks Sterling again a few hours later. Hey, August is too soon. How about July? As if to say that makes no sense. If you're not ready in August, why are you even throwing out July? I think Sean O'Malley got some dubs on that stuff. Anyway, I see a nice little rivalry developing. It can only help the fight night and the pay-per-view numbers, I imagine. Mike, what did you think of this little interaction and what's playing out like this? And in the end, will we get these two in August?
I think we will. I think this fight will happen August 19th in Boston. I don't love the way that we've gotten here for kind of the reasons you laid out. Aljamain Sterling, if his side of the story is to be believed, and I do feel it is, because I believe we had Shaquille, I'm forgetting his last name, from CBS Sports. He was like on the phone with Ray Longo doing an interview when they announced this fight. And he was like, well, we haven't really like agreed to anything officially. And then it came out that it was just a verbal agreement, but UFC announced it in a way that seemed like it was 100% set in stone. And that seems a little bit like it was to put pressure on Aljamain Sterling, who understandably the man fought 2 weeks ago. And he said just needs to figure out if his bumps and bruises are good enough. But if he can make the date, he's going to try to make the date, and fair play to him. But it was a little rushed in terms of the UFC getting out the door, but this also shouldn't be a surprise, right? Like, they faced off in the cage at 288, and Dana White said minutes after that August 19th is when he would like the fight in Boston. It just does feel like a big turnaround for Aljamain Sterling. I mean, people out there can talk all the crap about this guy that they want, but he is the most active champion in the UFC right now by a pretty good margin, right? So respect to him if he's going to try to make this turnaround. And I think he will. And I think he sees the opportunity, right, with Sean O'Malley in terms of what this can do for his exposure and probably his biggest payday yet. I know Sean O'Malley hasn't headlined pay-per-views and he's not that known commodity at this point, but I do see the hype surrounding him and the metrics he gets. And I think this will do a solid pay-per-view number for the UFC and for these guys. So I think it's in Aljo's best interest to take this fight. Just don't necessarily love how he got there. And then this handling of, being like, oh, let's do it in June now, he's saying, as he's like eating ice cream on his Instagram stories and stuff. It's like, okay, bro, just like kind of pick a lane here, say you're getting ready for August 19th. It's not about who's, can be harder over Twitter and things like that and put out the little things that they're doing to tease each other. Just commit to the August 19th date and let's do this. We know it's not perfect circumstances for you, but this is sometimes what the UFC calls upon their champions to do. They have a schedule they need to maintain. They want multiple title fights in Boston, and this is the one they want. So for him, it's pretty clear the UFC is probably going to move on to Henry Cejudo and like an interim title fight or something if he said no. So it's almost like pick your poison to a degree with Aljamain Sterling. So I would like to see him treated a little better. I think he just said something on his podcast that we shared in like our Slack channel where he was basically just like, why can't Dana say, hey, we talked to Aljo, he agreed to the fight, things aren't 100% perfect right now, he's got some injuries, but like he'll be there. If not, we might have to take another plan and be like a little more respectful. But it's instead like, oh, the guy can't get out of his own way, like, can I explain to you what's going on in Aljamain Sterling's head? Just doesn't feel like the best way to treat your champion, especially one that's being so active for you. So that's what I don't love, but it's kind of being a theme of this episode, going back to the Francis Ngannou thing. Dana White has his own style of doing this. And if you've been following the sport long enough, none of it should surprise you.
Mike, is Aljo even more active than Volk and Izzy? That kind of surprised me. I don't like to beef with the stats guy on our staff because you got that down pat for sure. But that one caught me
Yeah, I
off
mean,
guard a little.
Izzy's probably up there for sure, but obviously, he lost the belt, so he was challenging for the title in his
I
last
see.
fight as opposed to defending it, and Volk was going up too. So yeah, they've all maintained a pretty strong schedule. These are the
Title
guys that
defenses.
are kind of
Got it.
carrying the UFC, but Aljo's, being pretty consistent. He just fought, TJ not that long ago either, and just fought Henry, and is now going to fight a few months later. Yeah, I mean, if you get 3 fights in a 1 year span, I'd say you're up there.
Got it. Okay. All right. Look, here's a few notes, and then I'll turn it over to Goes. Volkanovski, he's gonna fight, but he's gonna fight like he's going February to July, whereas Aljo's going April to August. Jamal Hill, he won the title before Aljo, and he's not being asked to defend. John Jones won the title 1 month before Aljo. We think he's fighting in November. We wanted it in July, but we think he's fighting in November. And he was barely even in a fight that day. Makhachev, same thing. He won it in February. He's not fighting till October. Israel Adesanya won it. He won it back in April, but looks like he'll probably run it in September when they go back to Sydney, Australia. Leon Edwards is another one. Alexa Grasso all fought before Aljamain Sterling, and they're not either booked or officially or nothing's even being talked about in terms of their next title defense. So I kind of see Aljo's point there. But anyway, it goes. What do you think of this whole thing going on with Sterling, OMalley, and Dana White?
It's odd. Really, when you think about it, Dana White's intent on having that fight. But what does he mean exactly, right? Like Mike alluded to, is it Aljamain Sterling and Sean O'Malley, or could it be someone else? They just love to throw that stupid interim title out, so you never know. I don't blame Aljamain Sterling here. He's done a lot for the company, and right now, if you look at the statistics and the things he's done in his division, he's got a lot on the line. And at the end of the day, as a fan, I would imagine you would want a fair representation of both fighters in this fight. And if he's sitting there saying that to this day he still has pains in his leg from the last fight that just happened, I think he's kind of earned the right to, if he has to push that fight back a little bit, you would think the UFC would want to play along with him for something like that. I want to see this fight. They brought him in the cage for a reason. They got our appetites going. I think it will be a good fight, but at the end of the day, I do want a fair representation of both fighters. I want them both to be healthy. As far as the smack talk's going, man, I'm loving it. And I do feel like Sean O'Malley got a 10-9 there early on Aljo. But when push comes to shove that fight, I don't know. I kind of have Aljamain Sterling. Sean O'Malley's made some big strides in his game from each fight, and maybe he's made another one. But right now, I think this is going to be a real interesting fight. But I don't blame Aljamain Sterling one bit.
Anakin Skywalker in the chat says Dana wants Sugar Sean to win and be a draw for the UFC, which is probably the reason he doesn't like Aljo. Anyway, Danny, weigh in on the topic. What are your thoughts on everything going on here?
Yeah, I don't know how much more I can add. I think Goes and Mike did a pretty good job at covering this topic. I very much feel the way they do towards it. Aljamain Sterling, yeah, he's one of the most frequent champions defending the belt right now, but he's also the most dominant champion we've seen at bantamweight in a long time. TJ Dillashaw, Cody Garbrandt, Peter Yan, like all these guys that have been champions in recent years, even Dominic Cruz towards the end of his title run, even Cejudo, they really won the belt, didn't defend it, or were only able to defend it once. And now we're going on, I believe, Aljamain Sterling's fourth title defense here. And also, out of all the names that you had mentioned that had fought before Cejudo, the champions, before Sterling, that still have yet to be booked, I would say that Sterling probably has the hardest weight cut than all of them. So it's like you're making this guy return faster than everybody, and he likely probably has like the toughest weight cuts from compared to all the other champions. So it does seem unfair. And also, it seems he got caught off guard by the announcement as well. I wonder how much the UFC rushed it, since they had the Francis Ngannou news that day as well. So I'm sure they wanted to pack in as many fights as possible to overshadow the announcement a bit. And I don't blame them. Obviously, that's anybody that would be in Dana White's position would do the same. That's what a promoter does to the competition. But yeah, don't like it. I think Sterling deserves a lot more respect. Again, one of the most dominant champions, or the most dominant champion we've seen in recent years. And yeah, he deserves the respect, at least Okay, fine, insist on the date, but make him look good. I mean, that's your job as a promoter. Make him look good at the presser. The dude just fought. We're seeing if he could be ready, like Mike said. But he's a badass. He's gonna turn right back around and fight the number one contender. I don't know. There's certainly way better ways to put it than the way Dana White did.
Anakin Skywalker is also saying Sugar Sean's taking over next. Meaton says, I think it's an easy win for Aljo. And West Coast says OMalley isn't winning this fight. So they're already picking sides here in the chat. Chat's blowing up today. I think it's 1-1 going into whatever press conference they have. I think Aljo won the face-off, not necessarily because he said anything or was more witty, but his partner, Merab Dvalishvili, somehow wound up with OMalley's jacket, so he wins that night. But OMalley wins the next night with these tweets where he kind of checked them and says, August 19th, I'm calling the shots. Real quick, guys, really, really quick. Who's the A side going into this fight? Is it OMalley?
That's tough.
In terms of popularity, yeah.
I would tend to agree, but we'll find out how popular Sean O'Malley is, as I kind of alluded to earlier, when you have to throw down for a $90 pay-per-view with his name on the banner.
That's a good point. All right.